All right, boys. Well, this is SANDCAST, quarantine podcast, beach volleyball with Bourne and Travis Mewhirter. And we have our guest from afar via Zoom, and we got Christian Hartford, the head trainer at USA Volleyball. What's going on, dude?
Hey,
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming on. I'm sure it's not too tough to find free time these days.
No. Whenever you look at the schedule to try to book something in, usually about 99% is open right now. So that part's good.
What's crazy though is that like the days somehow just sneak by. Like when you have nothing scheduled in there, you like look around and you're like, when did it get to 7:45 at night? Like I haven't done anything.
I actually reached out to a guy that I know works a lot remotely and asked him, I was like, I need some productivity tips for being at home, because if I don't block a little bit of time off for each task, like you said, before you know it, it's 1 PM. You're like, oh man, okay, there's the first half of the day gone.
I'm like, how did I not have enough time to do anything today? I didn't get my things done, and I had nothing to do the whole day.
Oh, yeah.
What the hell is going on?
Well, you're living that dad life too, and I know that probably takes up some time.
Yeah, man. I'm getting that extra workout. Biceps are getting real nice right here, Christian. You'd be proud.
Yeah, I loved did you guys see Kane's video that he put up with his workout with Koa, his baby girl?
Oh,
yeah,
man.
when she was on the shoulders the whole time.
Right, like watching like Kane do curls with his like toddler daughter was hilarious. Her arms were just like flailing back and forth.
That was really funny. I'm glad you posted that.
Yeah.
My daughter just started liking just like being thrown around somewhat, like me like jumping up and down with her.
Yeah.
So I was doing that this morning, like lifting her up and down really quickly, and my biceps were just burning. God, I need to stop.
So Christian, we got a new trainer in town, Nia Bourne. She's taking your spot.
Yeah, seriously. She's doing workouts right now.
Yeah, exactly. We should do that.
But yeah, I know you're relatively, I mean, not super new anymore, Christian, but kind of relatively new to the USA scene. If you just want to kind of give our listeners sort of a quick background of kind of who you are, where you kind of came from. I know we got East Coast brothers here, so appreciate you making that move too. If you just kind of want to give our listeners like a little background and how you ended up in Torrance training maybe the best beach volleyball country in the world.
Yeah, I've been here for a little over a year. I think it's about a year and 2 months now. Got here in January 2019, and I actually came over from University of Maryland. So that's that common right there. Let's go Terps. And I was at Maryland for about 3 years, working with their women's indoor team, as well as several other teams in that athletic department, which was a lot of fun. And whenever I was over there, I actually came out to visit Tim Pillow and Jimmy Stitz down with the indoor team. Okay. And we had a continuing education budget at Maryland that I used to fly out here and stayed at this random family's house in Anaheim, and I had a spare bedroom in there, and spent about 4 days just shadowing the indoor teams down there and kind of seeing how they're training and seeing the process of all that. And during that, actually, Tim Pillow emailed me 2 days before I was supposed to fly out and said, hey, put together a 30-minute presentation for us on everything you're doing with Maryland volleyball. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, that sounds good. So kind of scrambled last second to put together a presentation. And after that visit, I just built up a great relationship with those guys and kept in touch with them, and got on the phone a lot with them, just kind of asking them questions about indoor volleyball when I was still at Maryland. And then that's actually how I learned about the opening of the beach volleyball job. Tim reached out to me and let me know that it was going to be posted, keep my eye out for it. And my wife, being from Portland, Oregon, wanted to come back to the West Coast and get a little closer to her family, because we met in Chicago and she's from Portland, and we went to Chicago all the way over to DC. So I kind of dragged her all the way across the country, and then we actually came all the way back. So it was good. It was a fun 3 years at Maryland, but when this opportunity came up, it was a whole new challenge in a much higher specialty, being just beach volleyball. And it was an easy answer whenever I got that offer. So it's been pretty awesome so far for a little bit over a year. It's been a blast.
Yeah, man, we've definitely enjoyed having you. It's been a breath of fresh air. Because obviously I'm still working out with Mikkel, my original trainer, but you've been super open to working in what I'm already doing and having me still work with you and stuff I need and helping me get what I need. So that's been really cool for me, because before you came, it wasn't quite like that. It was you're either all in USA or you're all out. And now I can kind of dabble in both, and it's been nice.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing. And I know Tyler talked about this, and he talks about it a lot of, as USA, I want to be a resource to every single athlete that is on the roster, right? Whether that's doing full programs and full conditioning programs and, being at practice, or that's, just maybe doing one shoulder mobility program every 2 weeks or so, right? And, with you, I mean, we kind of found that happy medium where you come in and you do Mikhail's workouts in the facility sometimes, but then also, like you said, we're doing some mobility programs. You're also working with Mike on some stuff, our athletic trainer, Mike Martinez. And then, I remember that one air assault workout that I put you through for a little bit of conditioning. That was just a blast. So it's been a good balance, and it's been a lot of fun getting to know, each and every athlete that we do have on the roster, even down to the people that come during that later afternoon time, like Katie Spieler, Jace Pardon, Carly Wopat's in there a lot. So it's just been fun building relationships with all these athletes.
Yeah, I think that's been important, just to be flexible at this time, because the national team in general is still kind of morphing and forming into what it's ultimately going to be. And that's kind of what Tyler Hildebrand's been trying to do. But it's still in that phase where it's changing. A lot of athletes that have been here have been doing a certain thing a certain way for a long time. So having that flexibility during this time, even though it seems like it's going to a more structured system, with the national team practices and just all the more stuff that you guys are adding in, I think it's going towards that direction where everyone can kind of maybe sort of be in a similar, in the same gym or working with the same groups. But it's been nice to have that flexibility for sure.
And it's just so much different than college athletics where I came from. Obviously, when you guys both play college sports, so it's, your strength coach tells you what to do. You're with your team at a certain block, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like all of that stuff is decided by the coaching staff or the strength and conditioning staff. And then the athletes are required to be there, right? For the most part. Obviously, NCAA has all the voluntary stuff. But that was actually one of the exciting challenges about this job whenever I took it, was like, oh, this is a whole different environment, not just going from college athletics into professional athletics, but just the nature of the beach volleyball community, of the nature of autonomy, how everyone kind of had their own thing going on. And we were trying to create this relationship to bring a little more people in to provide a service for everybody. So like I said, it was a challenge right from the start. And I know Tyler talks about that all the time, and we talk about that as a staff, but it's been a really fun challenge, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. So that part's been cool.
I think you guys are doing a great job with it for sure, and things are going in the right direction. But for sure, I could see it being a challenge.
Oh, yeah. And again, I mean, the cool part for me, though, too, is watching your workouts and watching, a couple other athletes' workouts that have outside trainers. It lets me learn a lot, too, right? So it kind of expands my mind because, obviously it's working for you guys, right? Like what you guys are doing is working for you. So that allows me to watch your workouts and learn a couple things that I may, either one, I can watch your technique and help you out, or two, I can be like, hey, I really like that move and I kind of want to try that myself. And then maybe I could implement it in a program here. Or, hey, have you ever thought about progressing this move into this to just make it a little more difficult?
Yep.
And then when you're in our facility, sometimes there's equipment that you don't have, right? Or that we kind of have to modify a movement. So again, kind of going back to the principle of any way I can be a resource for you guys, any way that I can be a tool and help you guys out, that's what we're going for. So,
yeah. Well, how much, because it must have been a huge challenge. Like, first of all, I don't even know if you ever watched beach volleyball before this. How much of the indoor volleyball did you actually get to be a part of? Or how long did you get to be a part of the indoor scene at Maryland?
So I watched beach volleyball, but I was never around the sport. As far as, there wasn't – I think the closest we got to beach volleyball at Maryland was those summer practices or spring practices where it was the first nice day. So you let them go to the sand courts and just play pickup.
Oh, did they have sand courts?
Yeah, they had it up at
Oh, okay.
So, and then we would go up there and do some workouts in the off season as well, which was cool. But as far as kind of legitimately around the sport, beach volleyball, it was few and far between other than watching on TV. But as far as being an indoor, that was one of the greatest parts about the job at Maryland, is that I was at every practice. I was at every team meeting. I was in film sessions. I traveled to every game, and which is kind of rare for college athletics, but it was pretty much from when we would open gym in July till we would finish the season end of November. I would say they occupied 90% of my time, and I would usually have 2 or 3 other teams along with that. But volleyball was the main priority there. And obviously, you're working with so many other sports. But yeah, so I was around and very involved in the sport. And I actually think the nature of college athletics helped me out making the transition to beach because, I also trained gymnastics at Maryland. And, for those that know me personally, I'm not the gymnast build, right? So around the sport, right? A somersault, maybe a back somersault, but that's about it. I was also with women's lacrosse. I was with wrestling. I was with softball. So when you get into college strength and conditioning, I actually grew up a football player too and played in college. And so being around all these different sports, as the strength coach, you don't have any other choice but to learn everything about that sport, right? So kind of diving in headfirst, whatever sport you're working with, and being at practices and asking coaches questions, watching film, going to competitions to see the environment, and just, the pure nature of each sport. I think that type of diversity in my coaching background helped me a ton with the transition to beach.
Yeah, it seems like you had to be, and you were very open-minded coming in. I mean, you already knew volleyball, but now you're training the same thing, but in a place where the ground is falling out from under your feet, right? So like for you, your idea is to like figure out how players can generate power. That's like one of the jobs, right? But now it's like on a completely different surface that acts differently on the body. That must have been kind of a nice little interesting challenge, at least.
100%. And when you're with an indoor team and when you look at basketball players, right, like you can watch an NBA player or a professional indoor volleyball player, and they just kind of bounce off the court, right? You can be very elastic and very springy, but on sand, it robs you of that, right? It's hard to be elastic when, like you said, when that surface underneath you moves, right?
And the other way around too. I can barely dunk now. I can jump higher than I've ever jumped in my life on the sand, but now I can barely dunk. I feel like an idiot.
Yeah. It's an entirely different demand on the body. And that was, and the interesting thing too, is most of the research for jumping and for power output is done on hard surfaces, right? Because you can jump on the sand 10 times and that surface is never the same, right? Because it's always moving, it's always changing, right? Yeah. So a lot of the research about power development and jumping and kind of just vertical power in general is done on hard surfaces, right? So it's kind of about taking these concepts, like you're saying, of power development and vertical power and transitioning it into it. Like you said, sand jumping is much more muscular, right? You can't be that springy, right? It's much more muscle driven. So how do you take those principles and then apply it to the athletes that are now jumping on sand in order to kind of get the best of both worlds as far as a strong jump, but also a very powerful and explosive jump?
Yeah.
What do you think is like the sport that's closest to beach volleyball that you've trained? Because in my mind, you brought up gymnastics, which I thought was really interesting because it's sort of similar that you don't want to be super like big and bulky. Like you have to be super strong, but really limber too. I don't know if like indoor volleyball was really close to beach or gymnastics or like basketball.
So the one thing I would say about gymnastics, just because you brought it up, is the concept of power to weight ratio is huge, right? And the reason being because the sand takes so much force, the lighter you are and the more powerful you can be at that weight, the higher you're going to jump, right? Or the faster you're going to be, right? Obviously, that's a huge aspect of gymnastics, right? You don't meet a gymnast that's over like 5'6", right? On the men's side, they go up to like 5'8" or 5'9".
Man, that's a giant in gymnastics.
Yeah, exactly. And so their concept is, okay, we want to be the strongest, most powerful individuals possible, but at the most efficient weight of all time, right? And I obviously am not saying the lightest weight because there's obviously a point of diminishing returns there. But I think just because you brought up, I think that relationship, the power to weight ratio is huge. But I think in general, the basic movement of the game is, it's volleyball, right? And you're going from 6 people on the court to 2 people on the court, and then you're changing the surface, right? So there's huge differences. Differences in the way you jump, differences in the way that you have to read, and the defensive movements involve covering a little more ground because there's only 2 people on there. So, and I think that's what makes beach volleyball such a unique demand, right? It's just so much different. And, you know, even if you were to take a professional soccer player and say, okay, I'm going to same exact sport, no change in the rules, right? But you're going to play it on the sand. They would have a huge difficulty doing it, right? So it's hard to make a comparison like that, but just for the sake of comparison, I think that concept of power to weight ratio is a big thing that I was able to kind of grab from my experience with gymnastics and then just apply that basic principle. But like I said, it's a very basic physical principle. So,
right. I'm sure you've probably learned a lot, like just about training different athletes in different ways from indoor to the beach. Is there anything, and you've shifted so many sports that it was probably a little bit easier for you to make that adjustment, because you said you were a football player, and that obviously like football training doesn't work the way it would in say lacrosse or like golf or tennis. What have you found about beach that's been unique or different that you've been like, okay, well, this is a little bit new?
I would think so. I think the biggest new thing, right, is the jumping technique, where it's a lot like you can't broad jump on sand, right? You know, and so when we're training in the weight room and we're doing some sort of plyometric, right? So say it's a basic approach box jump that we're training, maybe doing a contrast with a squat or a deadlift or something. Mm-hmm. Whereas naturally an athlete is going to be able, because it's a hard surface in the weight room, to jump from point A to point B and move forward a lot more than on the sand. Right. Yeah. So just that concept of, okay, you have to get your feet under, you have to sink down in much more of a squat, and you have to be a much more knee dominant jumper. Right. That's one of the things about, you know, beach volleyball, as far as, you know, the amount of people that have the patellar tendonitis or these chronic knee issues, because it's such a knee dominant, quad dominant activity, right? You're not going to be able to take that away. So I think just that complete change in jumping technique was something that was very new. I also think the nature of my job is that I have a 44-year-old athlete on this end and then a 20 end, right? So, you know, we always talk about individualization, right? And how you're actually going to do that program. And as beach volleyball players, you all need these certain characteristics, right? But athlete A may get it a lot different than athlete B. And then also athlete C may have a much bigger strength in their game that needs to be focused on compared to athlete D. Right. So you have to take into account all of these individualizations because, and like I said, I was listening to the podcast that you guys just released about the delay or the postponement of Tokyo. Right. And try something you said is that these sports that involve that 100th of a second that makes the difference, 1 or 2 days of training makes a huge difference. Right. And to compare that to beach volleyball, in a sport where there's only 2 people on a team, right? If that one person can make a slight modification or a slight physical improvement, that can have huge effects in competition, right? And really carry them. So just that concept of individualization across this huge spectrum, working with male and female athletes from age 44 down to 22, right, was something that, again, we were talking challenges of the job earlier, but fun challenges. That was something that's definitely unique to this sport and definitely unique to my job specifically.
Yeah. Now, speaking of challenges, you've got a whole new one, training athletes via Zoom and from home.
Yeah. It's been a heck of a time so far.
I bet. So what have you been doing to kind of keep everyone active and healthy and keeping sanity at the same time?
The funny thing was we had about, I think, 6 days before the day that we closed down our training facility and the day that they released the news about the Tokyo postponement. So my first reaction was, okay, I need to get everybody on programs that they can do at home. And like Tri said earlier, we were giving out equipment because there's no sense in it being in the facility just sitting there, right? So athletes were taking equipment. I came home and I wrote every single athlete on the roster a new program that they could do at their house. And then the news of the postponement came. And it was like, oh, okay, well, this changes a lot. And then the news of Vienna and Hamburg cancellation came. It was like, oh, they're canceling events in August now, right? So it's almost been a complete 180 where right at the start of all of this, my thought process was, okay, we need to keep these athletes on a track, right? Because with Tokyo being planned, you start at Tokyo and then you plan backwards, right? You don't just go 3 or 4 weeks at a time and then hope that you get there, right? You start at your end goal, and then how are you going to reach that? And so then all of a sudden that end goal gets taken away. And it's like, oh, okay, right? So then the planning just changes a lot. Honestly, my biggest advice and what I've been telling a lot of athletes right now is keep your fitness, keep your conditioning, and don't get burned out. Because, you were talking about this on that last episode of right now, it doesn't, like, what are you training for, right? A lot of people can fall into that mindset of, well, we don't have any tournaments planned. Hopefully the
Right.
APC happens in the middle of June. And if that does happen, and again, hopefully it does, then that's our first big event, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least for these next, a week or two, I told athletes, hey, you have the program, right? But make sure that you're taking care of the mental process of all of this as well, trying to manage the stress, help yourself out on that end. And then we can worry about the physical stuff after that. So like I said, the athletes have the equipment at their house. They have programs that they can do at home. But right now I'm kind of on them about, hey, give yourself a little bit of a mental rest right now, maybe at least for a week or two, enjoy some time with family, enjoy some downtime, let the body heal up, let the body reset, and then we can get back into training as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's taken me the full 2 weeks to mentally like decompress out of like the mode we were in. Because like you talked about having, our end goal is Tokyo, right? But for a lot of us, or for most of us actually, we can't even think about Tokyo because we're in the qualification.
So we have so much to take care of, yeah.
Yeah, we were like in the heat of it. So like mentally for months, we're just focused on this one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like gone. Yeah. So for me, it's taken like 2 weeks. Maybe, I'm having a good day today, but who knows what tomorrow will be like. But yeah, it's definitely like tough. Like mentally, you have to like snap in and out of or you have to somehow snap yourself out of that mode, because you're going to get so drained if you stay in this high pressure, like kind of anxious mindset for who knows how long, Yeah. But I feel like I'm at this point, like finally like, okay, like, I'm getting interested in, reading books and learning new stuff, and like stuff that I was totally blocking out of my mind because I just had something to focus on,
Oh, 100%. I'm starting to teach myself how to play the ukulele. So it was still some time, pick up a little hobby. So that's been a lot of fun. But another part about that for me is reaching out to athletes and not always asking them, hey, how are your workouts coming? Hey, how's the body feeling? But, hey, how are you doing with all this news, right? Like, how are you handling the postponement? Where's your head at right now, right? And just kind of opening that conversation. And I was talking to a few of my colleagues back from Maryland yesterday, and one of our other big things right now is try to avoid just texting your athletes as much as you can. Like, if you can get on a phone call, right? Or yesterday I FaceTimed with a couple people. That helps with the communication. That helps keep that presence and that relationship that you've built up. And it also just helps them feel like, hey, we still have support in this time, right? Because not only is Tokyo postponed and all these events are canceled, but you also can't see anybody, right? So that's the crazy part, And so we have some younger athletes that have an apartment by themselves, and they're just kind of hanging out by themselves. We have some others that, are the older and families and kids and all that. So navigating that type of communication has really been interesting. But I've tried to FaceTime or Zoom or call on the phone as much as possible and just touch base with everybody and see where they're at mentally first, and then move on to the physical plans after that. So there's a lot out of our control right now, but those are a couple of the things that we can control. So I'm trying to capitalize on all that. Yeah,
you've also stayed in touch with us visually through Instagram, right? I don't know if they're public, but a lot of people can get some really good free knowledge about working out at home if they followed you.
Yeah, so I've tried to be very consistent with that. One, as a way of just having a little more of a presence when I can't see anybody in person. But two, mostly all of those exercises are exercises that are on our athletes' plans, right? So rather than them always having to call me or text me, hey, what's this, what's that? I just send out videos all the time to the athletes. And then I figured, why not just post these on Instagram and write a little bit. And then it's actually good for the company as well, USA Volleyball, of having a little more content that we can get out there to some of our younger athletes, in the club organizations and some of the club coaches. that are looking for something to do right now and a little bit of guidance. So
yeah, that's been super helpful, because it's like I get workouts a lot sent to me, obviously through Mikkel right now, and I'm like I can't remember the name of everyone. I'm like, sit down frog hop with a this or that, like anything.
Yeah.
But for a lot of the stretches and mobility stuff I see you doing, I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw that in at the end. But then you're talking us through it and showing us as well. So in my head, I know that I'm doing it right. Not like, pretty sure, do I want my elbow high or low, or Yeah. So it's been nice to have that to refer back to, for sure.
That's what I wanted to avoid. I see a lot of videos on social media of somebody doing like a whole workout at hyper speed. And I'm like, I don't even know what you just did. I'm trying to be a little more instructional with that and actually kind of lay stuff out. It's also resulted in my dog becoming, I think, a little Insta famous, which has been weird.
Dude, sitting right behind you every time.
He's in there all the time. It's ridiculous.
That's great camera presence.
Yeah, which has been pretty fun. So yeah, that part of this has been cool. And like I said, I mean, the principle of always just trying to be the best resource possible. And I figured, honestly, no offense to you guys, but you guys check Instagram more than you check your emails sometimes. So I figured that was a more streamlined route of communication.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, do you have, are there like a couple, and obviously, where can people find your videos on Instagram, our listeners who aren't following you?
So my handle on there is C Hartford 1010. And it's a public account, so you can look that up and find it. And honestly, until this, I haven't been really active on social media. I've actually tried to lay off of it, but then I was like, you know what? One, again, it puts it out there, and gives people a resource during this time. And then also it kind of gives me something to do and share some knowledge and some influence and just some resources as well. So C Hartford 10.
Perfect. And for those who haven't followed you or don't have Instagram, the couple our three listeners out there who are not on Instagram, like what are a couple like silver bullet exercises that you think are really effective that you can do at home with no equipment?
So one, I think you can do so much at home with no equipment. It's, I mean, I would say the basics, whenever you first get into strength and conditioning, you hear about kind of the basic movements, right? Squat, which is any normal body weight squat, goblet squat, a barbell squat, whatever. A hinge, which is your RDL, single leg RDL, a hip thrust, some of those movements that are more hip dominant. A lunge, right? We see those forward, backward, lateral, all that. And then upper body push, pull, and then core, right? So you kind of have this basic bucket of categories that if you can check that box every single day, body weight, then you're going to be doing yourself a lot of favors, staying in shape and keeping a little bit of strength, right? So again, a body weight squat, a body weight single leg RDL, just because that's a little more challenging than just a basic RDL,
right.
A push-up variation, a row or a pulling variation, or a pull-up variation, lunges, and then core. And I think from an athlete-specific standpoint right now, with all the change in the competition, and then as well as anyone at home, general training is perfectly fine, right? You don't have to be, trying to be the best person in the world at these bodyweight circuits and, try to, do this 1 hour long all bodyweight workout.
Right.
If you can stay consistent with anywhere from 25 to say 40 minutes of, good effort, something that makes you sweat, something that, gets the heart rate up, but you don't have to kill yourself every single day just because now we're at home with nothing to do, so you just want to be consistent with it. And if you can check those very basic movement boxes, then you're doing yourself a lot of favors.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we're not going to be, hopefully we're not going to be quarantined forever. But when we get back into the gym, for those of, if you don't have access to a trainer, like what are a couple of your favorite exercises for beach volleyball players? So for like, just the random like open CBVA guy, like what are some things that he could be doing at, LA Fitness that you think are kind of like the biggies?
Yeah, so I think some sort of squat variation is huge. Like we talked about earlier, the jump in beach volleyball, it's very vertically positioned. It's very quad and hip dominant at the same time, right? But you want to get some form of squatting in there.
Yeah.
Then pull up variation or pull down variation if you can't do pull ups, just to strengthen up your back and your lats. And also that strengthens up that overhead position. Some form of overhead pressing, whether it's single arm dumbbell, single arm kettlebell, even a banded overhead press. Again, if you're going to be an overhead athlete, you have to be strong overhead. So don't shy away from that just because you think you're swinging all the time, so I'm going to leave that alone.
Right.
Stronger shoulder is the healthier shoulder, right? And then also, I think a lot of single leg work is very beneficial, whether it be the lunges, a single leg RDL, a rear foot elevated split squat, a double leg split squat where both feet are on the ground. I would highly advise that, just because the nature of the movements, and when you're trying to cover a lot of court, you find yourself shuffling and sprinting and backpedaling a lot. And those are all predominantly single leg movements, right? Or single leg dominant movements. So capitalize on that unilateral strength, unilateral being single leg in general. Get some form of squat and then strengthen up overhead so that you can maintain the health in the shoulder.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to shoulders, you're talking about something that we always have to worry about a lot. And I think the average person probably doesn't realize is like we need our shoulders to be really strong because we're overhead. But it's more of like the whole thing, the whole girdle has to be stable, right? So a lot of people be like, okay, I'll just do like a lot of delts, you know, like your shoulder's strong, but when we put it in this position or that position or here, which we're at a lot in this extension, you're going to be weak. And I've learned that in person a lot. Like I've been at one point in my career, I remember where I was like, I'm losing joust. Like I feel in control and my arm just gives out. Like I just can't hold it. And a lot of that comes down to, first of all, mobility, which Christian talks about. A lot of your power actually isn't just the sheer power that's coming from your muscle. It's coming from the range. If you have more space to move, then you have more space to create that power, right? That's what I'm 100%. Thinking. I think people don't really realize how important mobility, and when you're doing shoulders, like you have to work the whole thing. Your delt has sections to it, and there's a lot of muscles within the rotator cuff and blah blah blah. I mean, you could tell them about that, but I think people don't realize, like especially for volleyball, it's not just doing overhead press to work your shoulders and knees and hips and it's all the same.
It's everything. It's a lot of upper back as well. And you mentioned the mobility, and mobility is hugely important, and also the control of that mobility, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you specifically know, with Mike, or whether it's in the weight room, if you're doing, say, an overhead mobility exercise, we're not just going through a passive stretch, right? We're taking our time. We may do some holds up there, right? Or something that's super simple, a car, right? A controlled articular rotation. It's not like a normal shoulder circle where you're just throwing your arm around, right? It should be about a 10 or a 15-second rep, right? Where we may have you squeezing a ball to generate more tension through your arm and then go through the full range so that you're actually developing control through those ranges of motion, right? And
you sweat for some reason. Like, you're literally doing this, moving your arm in a circle, and I'm like, it's like a workout that I'm like, oh, I have to do cars, damn it.
Yeah.
It's so slow, and you're working every square inch of that entire range.
And for the people that want to know a little more about that, that's from the functional range conditioning system. And that was something that Mike and I went and got certified in and kind of brought back into the USAV. But pretty much all the basic concept is, don't just stretch your joints to get more range of motion, get more control through that range of motion, right? And you brought it up earlier, but a joust, right? You can be able to get your arm overhead, no problem. But if you're really weak up there, you're always going to lose that joust, right? Or even at point of contact, you may be able to get that kind of awkward swing. Maybe the ball drifted a little bit. But if you don't have control of that range up here, again, you're not going to have any power on your shot, right? So about generating more control and more power through larger ranges of motion, that's one of the more important physical things to have as an athlete.
I feel like the mobility aspect from all the trainers that I've talked to is just as important as the strength aspect, where because I saw a physical therapist like 2 days ago about like for my knee, and she was like, well, your hips are really immobile. She was like, so even though your strength component's there, you're not mobile enough to like access it and use it to like how much it can be used to benefit you. So she's like, you're just putting way too much stress. And even though you're like pretty strong in your legs, like you're not able to use it all because you're not mobile enough.
Well, I mean, it's exactly right? You have to be able to unlock that ability for your body to use what it has, right? And if you don't have mobile hips or if you don't have a mobile ankle, then that knee is going to suffer for sure. So it's more than half the battle, honestly, because if you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to capitalize on the strength or the power performance at all.
Yeah. And have you, I know that one of the coolest parts about, or at least I just got the same message. So we have no Zoom time limit. They gave us a gift. So we don't have the 40-minute shot clock. So we can take our time and chat here.
We've already gotten like an hour of information into our users. They're going to have to pause and take notes.
Now, I kept looking over at the timer. I was like, all right, we got like 5 minutes left. I have like 45 questions. That's not a good ratio.
Yeah.
But you've worked with big teams before, and at Maryland, you worked with multiple teams. And how nice has it been to like work with such a select groups of athletes at the highest level of their respective sport, where you get to really get to know them, where like, you can FaceTime Emily Day and be like, all right, well, this is what you need to do, or Betsy, or try, or whatever. I feel like even though you obviously developed relationships at Maryland, I feel like this is probably a whole new level of it.
100%, honestly. And when I first started, my first big college job was at Northwestern. I was 24, and I had 115 athletes that I was in charge of.
Holy cow!
Yeah, so I mean, you can develop relationships, but that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people, yeah. A lot of sports that you're working with. So to be in this environment, when maybe we're around 25 to 30 athletes working with right now at the USA facility, it's been incredible to do that, to build all of those relationships. And whenever you're able to do that and have the more select group, you're also just able to dive a lot deeper into the training process and the thought process behind what you're doing. And you're also able to get a little more creative with your process as well. Like we talked about individualization earlier, that's been a huge piece of it, is really being able to watch and talk to and see every single athlete as an individual perform and see what that person needs from the strength and conditioning side to get better. I also think that a huge benefit has been the ability to go on the sand with these teams. And I try to get to 4 to 6 practices a week. And hope, if it's a team practice where you have 2 or 3 teams together, then I'll be at those ones. But that's been a huge piece because, again, I'm able to go out there and now I can see them in their element, right? When I was at the college level, I was almost always at volleyball practices. I would go to a lot of lacrosse practices, but some of my other sports, I couldn't always make that practice, right? And that's when they're implementing what you're trying to teach them in the weight room, right, is during that sport. So for me to be working with a more specialized crew in a much smaller volume, it's been a blessing because now I can go out to these practices, see them live, see their movement, see how they jump, see how they swing. Also talk to their coaches about, okay, what are the coaches seeing, right? All the coaches there have a better beach volleyball eye than I do, obviously. So I need to be the one asking them questions. And the other part is I was dealing with this with a team where they were trying to make specific tactical changes to their strategy that had a very huge impact on the physical side of it, right? So then that's my job to say, okay, well, you guys are starting to try this, right? A much deeper blocking position. All right, then in my realm, I need you to get stronger out of more range of motion, right? Stronger, more powerful out of a lower position. So that's been the biggest benefit for me with this smaller, more specialized group, is that you can really dive a lot deeper into these training programs, get a little more creative with your programming as well. And, we brought it up earlier, but it's a lot more of me asking questions all the time, right? Asking questions to the athlete, asking questions to the coaches. I can't come in there and say, I think this is exactly what you need, right? I need to have those conversations to figure out, okay, from the sport performance side of things, how can I take that and match that with the tactical strategy execution side of things to make it the best possible program?
Yeah, that's super helpful as an athlete as well, in terms of, like, I'm in contact with Mikkel a lot. Like, before I go into the gym with him, I'll text him about that practice, how practice went. I'm not getting my ass low enough when I'm blocking, or I feel too high on defense, or before I make my lateral moves, I'm coming up before, and allowing you guys to understand what we're feeling, and then for you to actually understand and watch the game enough to be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Here's how it'll translate here. Here's the workouts that will work with it. Plus, the cool thing that you do is you help us with our warm-ups. So when we do have you on the road, you're implementing certain things that have worked for us specifically in our pregame warm-up. And I'm a firm believer in you get your body moving in the way that you want it to move. That's what a warm-up is for. It's not just to hit a few balls and do a little bit of this and that. It's to, okay, I want to hit that depth 5-6 times and teach my body where I want it to be, so that when I get in the game, it's just there already. And that's what's really beneficial to have you come in warm-ups. People probably don't know that you run the warm-ups for the national team practices, not the coaches. We have our strength coach do it because he understands how to warm the body up, first of all, but also what ranges we need to get it to. And then you've learned enough at this point to where you're implementing ball skills with the other coaches. So it's like a 5-coach warm-up led by you.
Yeah, that part has been a really cool evolution for me as a strength coach of, you mentioned it earlier, but the physical warm-up is one piece, right? And on that note, my one huge rule with warm-up that I saw a lot when I first started was your first jump in practice should not be 30 minutes into practice, right? You should get some form of jumping in your warm-up, and then you can hit the ground running a lot faster whenever that practice starts, right?
I tell my partner that. So, that's why I need him to warm up with you every time. I'm over here dripping sweat. I'm like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
He's like, look at this guy over here. He's just heckling me while I warm up. And then Christian comes in and is like, get to work.
Yeah, come on. You do a little more there. Let's go, buddy. The evolution of the sports skills side of it, and kind of the ball drills that we do before that Thursday training group. And that's been a lot of fun because that's been a collaboration with Tyler of, okay, these are the things that we're going to work on training group. And again, how can we kind of break that down to its most fundamental move? And then let's address that in a 45-minute warm-up session where it's very simple. You have, 1 or 2 tasks, but it's a pretty high level. And like you said, it gets the heart rate up, it gets the body warm. And also a lot of what we're doing there as well is the visual tracking, right? So that whenever you go with the defenders, we're doing that 2-ball drill, right? And again, it's just waking up the visual tracking, kind of waking up the nervous system in the mind a lot more in that warm up rather than just having the physical. And on the topic of warm-ups, we've done this a lot is, I'll bring some tennis balls to practice sometimes and just do some basic vision drills, right? Where you're literally just catching a tennis ball, or, you have your hands on top of your partner's hands and then he drops a ball and you have to snap under and grab it before it hits the sand, right? So the really basic vision drills, I think, are a huge piece for that athlete to get prepared. And Travis, going back to the original question of kind of, the smaller amount of athletes, that it's been great for me to kind of be able to evolve my process as I go through with each and every team. And, I over a year on the job, I mean, it's totally different now. And I think it's a lot better. So.
Yeah, it seems like you've settled in with everyone and everyone's super comfortable with you and vice versa. When you were first onboarded, was there kind of, I don't know if you took someone else's spot or if they made a new position for you? Because I know that when they onboarded Tyler Hildebrand, for example, it was a totally new position. So is what you were doing a new position, or were you kind of filling in for someone who had left?
Yeah, so the previous guy was the same position. He went up to the Sacramento Kings, the NBA team.
Okay.
Got a position job. So I was filling for him.
Okay.
And there was quite a time gap between when he left and when I came on. I think it was about 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
But after I got the job and accepted the job, I actually got in touch with him right away just to figure out, hey, what's this job like, right? What was your programming like with these athletes? What was the culture like? And I tried to ask, I went into the room thinking I'm the dumbest person here. I need to ask a lot of questions and figure a lot of this stuff out. I also asked a ton of questions to Tyler Hildebrand about, hey, what are we trying to create here culture-wise, right? What environment are we trying to create? And so coming on board, it wasn't a new position. I think we were striving for a new culture, though. And that's almost just as important as the new position, honestly.
For sure.
So asking a lot of questions of trying to figure that out and trying to figure out how to navigate that and try to bring what I could in order to accomplish that mission.
I think there's naturally a huge lack of culture within the national team or beach volleyball in general, just naturally because we're all separate teams. We're all competition. That's like the hardest thing about the most difficult job that the national team has, from my perspective, is somehow creating that culture where it's a winning a lot of medals kind of culture, but also understanding that we're all in competition against each other. And I feel like we really kind of lacked any sort of culture before, but you kind of brought in more energy to the weight room, more enthusiasm to it. You come from a football background. I believe you're a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of know how to get people going, big groups of people at least. I mean, it was funny. Like, a lot of us have joked about it, where it's like we're like in the training room getting treatment or something. We just hear you screaming in the weight room. Like, we never, we're probably like blown away by like how quiet these volleyball players are, in the weight room. Like, you're used to people like probably dancing and getting crazy, but we're all like, you're like working out next to your competition. So I think a lot of people are less free than they would be in like maybe that football environment or that team environment.
For sure.
But you're bringing in that energy for sure. Like, when I'm on that spin bike with you, I was just dying, and you're like screaming in my ear. I'm like, well, every few seconds I forget how much this burns because this guy over here is just screaming at me.
Yeah.
But it is nice though. I like it. And
honestly, I think that the fact that it's the nature of beach volleyball, right? We're not going to be able to change that when you and Trevor are in there and Jaker and Taylor are in there, you guys are battling for a spot, right? It's the nature of it. But kind of what I took it upon myself as my job is it's that doesn't involve me, right? So I'm not going to walk past one person without giving them a high five, right? I'm going to pump you up. I'm going to pump Trevor up. And I remember the first couple months, Trevor was like, who the hell is this guy? God, he never shuts up, right? So it's but that was my job of, I want to make that weight room the most positive, engaging environment possible. Right. And again, that doesn't mean that we're going to have full out conversations about how your wife and kids are doing or how your boyfriend and girlfriend's doing. Right. But that's just, when you walk through the door, I'm going to greet you. Whenever you're training, I'm going to pump you up. I'm going to engage, and the music's going to be blasting. And, if it's bad music, we're going to put on some Metallica or some AC/DC and crank that up a little louder. Or when Try's in there, we're going to put on reggae. And we're going to make that the most welcoming environment where we're still getting really good work done, but with really positive intention, with really positive attitudes, and just a really high energy environment. And I also try to bring that to the sand a lot too. I mean, there's been times during training group where, especially right off the bat where, I start maybe chirping some guys, or I start, just throwing, screaming across courts and shouting people out for good plays that they make and all that. So it's really important to me that we keep that high energy. And again, that's something that we can control. We can't control the nature of beach volleyball being 2-on-2 and how everything's set up, but we can control that weight room at USAV is a really fun place to be in, a really engaging community.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan for sure of the energy for sure, because sometimes it does get dull in our sport and a little lonely.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, going back to the college experience I had at Maryland, tried training 18 gymnasts at 5 p.m. right after a practice. We need some positive energy to get that going. So, I'm used to kind of creating that, and that's always been, one of the top pieces of my mission is just provide the most positive, engaging, productive training environment possible.
Nice.
Seems like it's working.
Yeah, it's going well so far. I'm having fun with it.
I'll say you seem to be enjoying yourself. It's great.
It's been a blast, man. It's truly a fun job, and from the little stuff like being able to ride a longboard down the Strand from practice to practice, to the big stuff of, traveling to world championships last year and being with these athletes at the highest levels of competition, and being there to scream my butt off and be the loudest, craziest guy in the crowd. It's been a blast through and through. So
yeah,
That's
I think
awesome.
World Champs was definitely one of the highlight, or I mean, for both of us, probably the highlights of last year. But I mean, we're playing in front of what? I think it was 13,000 fit in there, or something like that. 12 maybe.
Yeah, 13.
And I could hear Christian out of everyone.
I would always try to wait until the chants died down, and then I would scream something.
Oh, that's why. That's why. You're cheating it a little bit.
I tried to time it well. And I remember in Tokyo, I think it was Brouwer from Netherlands ran past me, and I was walking to the stadium court because I forget who was playing. One of our teams was playing. And he looks at me and he goes, "Let's go USA." And that was what I always screamed. And I looked at him, I was like, that's a good feeling right there. I was like,
that is awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. So like I said, I mean, through and through, I'm having a blast with this, and it's definitely a challenging job whenever you're at the highest level that like we were at, I mean, it's not easy, right? To go to the Olympics and win a gold medal. And it's a fun challenge. It's very welcomed and accepted, and we're pushing for it. So.
Awesome. Well, I haven't been able to work with you personally, but it seems like you've brought in a great culture into the program, and I can see that you're enjoying it. I mean, if you got Robbie Mewson cheering for the U.S., then well done, Christian Hartford.
Hey, I succeeded there, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got you for an extra 16 minutes. Zoom let us go past the time limit, so
that's awesome.
Appreciate you taking some time out of these crazy busy quarantine days.
Yeah, my pleasure, and hopefully I can see you guys in person soon. That would be fun.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else that you want to add, or anything we might have missed?
No, just appreciate coming on. This is an awesome show, so it's pretty cool.
Thanks. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for setting up the studio over there. Appreciate you keeping it
alive. Too.
I'm keeping it warm. Keeping it warm. I almost went with another one. Actually, no, I did. I wrote a corner quote here.
Yeah, I see it.
I was too lazy to write. So I wrote a corner quote to remind me to write that one later. It was a little Tom Brady, actually.
Oh, what did it say?
He was talking about, whatever, coming to the Buccaneers and blah, blah, blah. He was just sick of talking about it. So he said what his dad used to tell him is, well done is better than well said. So I'm going to go get to work. And he just
like it.
That's awesome.
I like it. All right, boys. Well, great seeing you guys. Good to see some faces again, and everyone stay safe and healthy.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys.
Shoots.